Hello, everybody, and welcome to Charts with Dan as we look at the box office from last weekend, and even more so, we continue to look at the fallout from the massive announcement that Warner Media made last week that the Warner Brothers theatrical slate will be debuting in theaters and on HBO Max simultaneously throughout 2021. We broke down all of the breaking news about that last week. Today, we're going to start going into the fallout. We've heard from the major theater chains, but it's not just the theaters who have thoughts about this deal. There may soon be lawsuits reportedly filed over this move. We will talk about that breaking news today, as well as so much more. But before we do, let's look at what there was at the box office this past weekend. As it was over Thanksgiving weekend, there's really only one film that did money of any real consequence, and that would be The Croods: A New Age, which banked another $4.4 million approximately over the weekend, an abysmal figure for any other time other than this time, but for pandemic time, it's as robust a box office number one as we've seen. Half Brothers at number two, that's a new release. Then we have Freaky, which is a holdover. It's also available at home, but some people are still going out to see it in theaters. All My Life, which is another new release at $350K, and then The War with Grandpa, still there in the number 5 spot at $329,000. Again, not going to be much action at the box office. We are going to see an uptick with Wonder Woman 1984. We may get our first glimpse about what this new hybrid deal might look like, because Wonder Woman 1984, while not officially part of the deal that Warner Media announced last week, is going to be similar to what's happening as far as debuting in theaters and streaming at the same time. So we will see what the numbers look like there, but expect the Croods to be on top there for quite a while, because we're still a few weeks away, 2 or 3 weeks away from Wonder Woman hitting theaters, so not going to quite see how that experiment works out just yet. There's no real effect on the 2020 domestic box office. Tenet has slowed to a crawl. It's going to stay pretty much where it is, a little bit of variance. Everything else, again, no movement, because there's really nothing much going on at the box office. We may see, depending on how it continues to do in theaters, we may very well see The Croods jump in there to the top 10 at number 10, then Wonder Woman 1984. I think we'll probably do enough business to jump in there. Monster Hunter, which is another film that's coming out here domestically, had a little bit of trouble in China, which we'll talk about in a second. We'll see how that does, but that's not a whole lot still is going to change on that top 10. Same this week as far as worldwide box office goes. Demon Slayer continues to do well. It's climbing up the chart. It's climbing up the all-time Japanese chart. I'm keeping an eye on that. It may soon well be the highest grossing movie at the Japanese box office in their history. But for right now, it stays at number 6. Ever so slowly, though, creeping up on Sonic the Hedgehog to take that number 5 spot at the 2020 worldwide box office. And I mentioned Monster Hunter, which is a Paul W.S. Anderson film that is slated to come out theatrically on Christmas. It had its debut in China. It was expected to do all right there this weekend, but it ran into an unexpected snag. Despite the fact that it passed the censorship board in order to be shown nationwide, it actually was pulled from theaters on Friday after it had already started playing because of a joke that was deemed by many who saw it racist against Chinese people, Chinese culture. The producers behind the film have since apologized for the joke. They've said that they're going to re-edit the film to remove that joke. However, because this is China, there is no guarantee that the movie will be approved to go back into circulation. It may well be that they've had their shot and they've lost it. We'll see if Monster Hunter does get a further release in China. But we've seen before films that don't pass the censorship and have their release dates pulled. It's far more rare for a movie to actually come out after passing that process and then get pulled. This was not something that was necessarily instigated by the Chinese government. This seems to be something that was instigated by the Chinese people who saw the movie and felt that this was a joke that was not reflective of their culture and in poor taste. So we will see if Monster Hunter comes back out in China. It is still scheduled for a release date later this month here domestically. Moving on from that to fallout from last week's huge news. In case you missed it, it was announced by Warner Media and AT&T and Warner Brothers that for the entirety of 2021 that their slate will debut on HBO Max and in theaters simultaneously, which completely shatters the theatrical window, the amount of time between when people can go to a theater and when people can watch it at home. The one thing that we were talking about last week as we were breaking the news that I couldn't wait to hear is the reaction from the big theater chains, the exhibitors, and we got those reactions in over the weekend. The first one being from AMC, which is not surprising because they were the ones that came out so strongly against the Universal model with Trolls World Tour and their statement that they were going to do that potentially more in the future. This is what Adam Aron, head of AMC Theaters, said, quote, "These coronavirus impacted times are uncharted waters for all of us, which is why AMC signed on to an HBO Max exception to customary practices for one film only, Wonder Woman 1984, being released by Warner Brothers at Christmas when the pandemic appears that it will be at its height. Clearly, Warner Media intends to sacrifice a considerable portion of the profitability of its movie studio division and that of its production partners and filmmakers to subsidize its HBO Max startup. As for AMC, we will do all in our power to ensure that Warner does not do so at our expense. We will aggressively pursue economic terms that preserve our business. We have already commenced an immediate and urgent dialogue with the leadership of Warner on this subject." And one thing that this statement confirmed, and it's pretty much confirmed through the other statements, is the fact that Warner Media or AT&T or Warner Brothers or whoever did not inform or run this decision by any of their exhibitors, any of the theater chains. Most of them were caught flat-footed on this and are now rushing to try to figure out if they can have a profit-sharing deal that is going to break in their favor, because the bottom line is they're going to lose business, and particularly in the beginning half of the year, a lot of business to this arrangement. So AMC saying that they're going to enter aggressive negotiations, not committing, by the way, to show Warner Brothers films, saying that they are entering into negotiations for a profit-sharing deal that is going to work in their favor. I don't know if they're going to be get those terms, but we'll see. This was a reaction from Cinemark, one of the largest theater chains here in North America. Quote, "In light of the current operating environment, we are making near-term booking decisions on a film-by-film basis. At this time, Warner Brothers has not provided any details for the hybrid distribution model of their 2021 films." That's a bit of a punt, but again, confirming that Warner Brothers did not go through and try to make this right or try to clear the path with theater chains prior to making this decision. And then this is a statement from Cineworld, who owns Regal, the second biggest theater chain in the United States, also a big chain over in the UK. This was their statement, quote, "Cineworld was aware of WB's plan to release Wonder Woman directly to its streaming service, which has been announced at a time when our cinemas remain closed in the US, Regal, and UK, Cineworld. We are very encouraged by the giant steps achieved recently with regards to the COVID-19 vaccination process, which is expected to be put in place earlier than previously anticipated. This will generate significant relief for our industry and enable our cinemas to make a great comeback. We believe that at such a time, WB will look to reach an agreement about the proper window and terms that will work for both sides. Big movies are made for the big screen, and we cannot wait to reopen our cinemas in Q1 in order to offer our customers, as always, the best place to watch a movie." So this is a little bit of a different stance. AMC going on a very offensive posture, saying, like, we are opening a dialogue immediately with Warner Brothers to find a deal that's going to work for us. Cineworld saying that when theaters are open again, they believe that Warner Brothers will come to them looking for a deal that will work, probably or potentially because they could threaten to boycott. Who knows? That's going to be the next thing. If these theater chains cannot come to terms with Warner Brothers, if they cannot get a split that they think is favorable to them, that can help them make up the lost business, will they go for a wholesale boycott of Warner Brothers films and say, as long as you're debuting it on the streaming services, we will not show it in our theaters? These are going to be negotiations. We talked about the fact that Warner Brothers had been able to give theaters enough of a profit split, I think it was close to 60-40 reportedly on Wonder Woman 1984, that they were okay with that movie going to HBO Max and theaters, mainly because, yes, the pandemic is very much hitting its stride, unfortunately, or a second or third stride, but an entire year, and that really, and I talked about my thoughts last week, but that is the thing that really, to me, is an indicator that this goes beyond just a pandemic reaction. The fact that you're going the entire year instead of saying, we're going to do it for the first 6 months of the year, and then at the end of June, we're going to reevaluate. That will give us time to negotiate. That will give us time to inform all interested parties. And then if it looks like that we are going to go this direction for the rest of the year, then we'll go this direction for the rest of the year. The fact that you do the entire year at once is a real indicator that this, to me, goes beyond just a pandemic experiment and is a business experiment. However, it's not just theater chains that are reacting somewhat negatively or at least looking for more clarification to this deal. It's the people that Warner Brothers itself is making movies with. As today, there were reports that Legendary, who partnered with Warner Brothers on Godzilla vs. Kong and also on Dune, and in both cases provided the majority of the money, the majority of the budget to make those films, was not consulted or informed of this decision. Legendary has partnered with Warner Brothers on so many films over the years. There are two in particular that are on this 2021 slate, Godzilla vs. Kong and Dune. And now, for lack of a better word, they're pissed because they now have no road right now to profitability because they don't know how these movies are going to turn a profit. They don't know what is the revenue sharing deal. They're now going to Warner Media saying, you know, what the hell, bro? How does this even work? And that's a great question. How does this even work? How does this revenue sharing work? How do you know which Max? Legendary also particularly not happy that Warner Media supposedly made most, if not all, of their money back right away because instead of waiting for the money to come in from the box office, you get paid from Netflix, you get paid back for the money that you put in. Warner Media reportedly put the brakes on that because they wanted to do this HBO Max thing. But if you're Legendary now, you're saying like, well, wait a minute. You put the kibosh on a deal that would have given us $250 million for this movie that we put up the majority for, and then you as a corporation decided to do this hybrid release strategy that has a very questionable path to profitability, meaning, you know, at least show me how this works. Do you do a X amount of subscribers? Do you just go door to door and ask them why they subscribe to your service? And if they say Godzilla vs. Kong, then they give you X amount of money. Is it a literal pay per view? Do you use your user data and see, oh, well, 3 million people watch Godzilla vs. Kong and crunch the numbers? I understand why Legendary is so upset about this, potentially suing MAD if they can't come to a resolution. Reports that they could be ready to file a lawsuit to get their money back or over this move that they think was something that is going to cost them money in the name of AT&T building their subscriber base for streaming for what they consider to be the future. So that's one complication. Another complication would be filmmaker relationships. Remember, Patty Jenkins with Wonder Woman 1984 was very against the idea of the movie going streaming when it was announced that it was going to stream. And to this day, she is still saying that she wants people to see the movie first and foremost, but is also saying, like, if there's a theater near you that's open and it's safe, I would love for you to see it in that environment. Denis Villeneuve, the director of Dune, also, according to reports, is not happy with this strategy because he would prefer that Dune, a movie that I'm sure he probably made to be seen on a massive screen, would get a standard theatrical release. The question is, will a director like Denis Villeneuve or a director like Christopher Nolan, who have both had long-standing relationships with Warner Brothers, are they going to say, looking forward to the future, well, wait a minute, I designed my movies to be seen on a big screen. Now, that's not a possibility right now, but let's say this experiment works and Warner Media makes the decision, and this seems very obvious that this was an AT&T Warner Media decision. They decide, okay, we like this hybrid strategy. We're going to go with this from now on. Are you jeopardizing a relationship with a director like that who says, well, okay, then fine, I'm going to go make my movie somewhere else, somewhere that will commit to a traditional release strategy, or at least one that offers an exclusive window in theaters before it hits streaming? The day and date thing, I think, is what's going to cause them a lot of trouble, because if you make it available for people to watch at home instantly alongside theaters, then you start having to prove things like how many people would have gone to a theater, how many people watched it on HBO Max instead of going to a theater. How do you calculate that money? Who should be compensated and how much? This is a complete swamp. This is a quagmire. And, you know, to be quite frank, And I'll talk about, the theatrical experiences versus streaming, because I've heard from a lot of you and you bring up some great points. But when we talk about this as a business decision, it's not necessarily that doing this is bad business. It's that doing this without talking to or consulting the theater chains, doing this without talking to or consulting your business partners, doing this without talking to or consulting the directors who make the movies for you, or at least knowing how they feel and still doing the thing that they don't want you to do. It seems like bad business to me. It seems like it could have been done better. And we look at HBO Max in general, the fact that they launched without being on Roku, the fact that they launched without being available on the Fire Stick. It's still not available on some of those services. You're leaving subscribers on the table. It seems rushed. Everything about this has seemed very rushed, from the launch of the service to this theatrical streaming hybrid. It doesn't seem well thought out. And in my mind, that's bad business. Good business should be well thought out, well planned, and executed. You should have a great strategy. And I know that these are weird times and different times, but the fact of the matter is that this pandemic has been going on for 9 months. And if Warner Media wanted to do this even 3 months ago, you still have time to consult with all of these different parties. From their standpoint, it's easier, but from my standpoint, it's not good business. And I think it's going to cause them a lot of headaches going forward. And we're going to see what happens, because if this Legendary thing turns into a court case, this could be a very consequential court case when it comes to how profit and revenue, etc., is shared and divided. It could lead to some kind of reporting similar to what we see with the box office. If it's decided like, well, these numbers should be things that are reported. How many people watch X? How many people watch this? This is one of the most closely guarded secrets for every streamer, is exactly how many people are watching. But if it comes down to the fact that the road to profitability runs through streaming, then it could also be that these companies that make these movies make it so that those numbers have to be reported, because that's how they know what the value of what they work on is. So this could be a sea change. I'm not saying it will be, but this could be a sea change in how this is reported on, how this is reported by studios. Again, these things are going to be playing out for weeks and weeks and months and months and months. But it is very interesting from an analyst perspective, and also a little bit discouraging from a business perspective. The other thing I wanted to note was, after the news broke last week, and I as soon as I saw that was happening, I did the video, and those were really just my initial first impressions. And if you've watched me, you know for quite some time that I am a very big defender of the theatrical experience. And I remain a defender of that because I think it is unique. And I think that the entire experience of film is in some way built around that. That's not to say that the only valid way to see a movie is in a theater. I've seen so many movies that I never saw in a theater that I've loved, but I do think that there's something magical and special about that experience that is unique to movies. But I heard from a lot of people, and I understand this, saying either, I can't afford to go to the movies as much. This is going to improve the accessibility, which I think is great, and I wouldn't argue with that. If that's the option that's right for you, then I think that's great. Some people saying, from a health perspective, and I agree, from a health perspective, particularly through the first half of the year, I think this is going to be good for people that just don't feel comfortable going to theaters. I understand that. And if they'd said we're going to do this for 6 months, I would have probably said, well, that sucks for chains, but it's understandable that, we're still dealing with this, and who knows how long that this vaccination process is going to take to play out. And then there's people that are happy about this because they said, you know what, I hate going to theaters. It's expensive. The people are rude. It's not a pleasant experience. And trust me, I relate to that as well. I believe 100% that the decline in the popularity of theaters among so many people isn't just technology and isn't just new ways of doing things. It's because the theaters themselves have abdicated a lot of responsibility to making the experience special for people, because the prices are so high, the ticket prices are so high, because there is no enforcement on people talking and people using their phones, and there should be. And I've said that way back when we were talking about MoviePass and the theatrical experience. I was saying the same thing. These theaters have to clamp down and enforce these things, because if you don't make this experience something that people want, the second they have a viable alternative, they're going to go to that. Well, meet your viable alternative. You just got it. It was just introduced. And so even once they come back, I still think that theaters have a lot to do to take responsibility on themselves to make movie going more enjoyable for the people that choose to do so. I know that because I get so wrapped up in this idea of preserving the theatrical experience that it can often seem like I'm saying that's the only valid way to enjoy a movie, to experience a movie. And I don't believe that. I do very strongly believe that there are certain films that are best experienced in a theater, that are best experienced with an audience. I do think that watching Star Wars The Force Awakens or Avengers Endgame at home versus a especially opening weekend theater crowd is a vastly different experience. And so when I get a little testy about the fact that Warner Brothers is doing this kind of thing, it's not necessarily that they're trying it, it's that the way that they're doing it, it feels like they're doing it at the expense of theaters. They're making this move and they're shafting the people who up until 6 months ago were the lifeline, the pipeline for movie lovers, the way that they got to see these kinds of movies. The only way they could legally see these movies was in theaters. So this pandemic has changed everything. And I also understand people saying like, well, they've got to make money. But, you know, we are at a point where it looks like there may be at least the beginning of the end in sight. And it feels to me like AT&T and Warner made the decision to turn their backs on theaters right when theaters needed them not to do that the most. And that's another thing, is a lot of people that work at movie theaters, big or small, are the biggest movie fans in the world, and they have that job because they love the movies and they want to work in close proximity to the movies, and that's how they can do it. People that manage these theaters. There are so many independent theaters. There's independent theaters here in Arkansas. There are some amazing independent theaters in Los Angeles. So if it seems like I'm a little set in my ways or that I'm clinging on to the past, part of it is that I don't want to see that experience go away. And part of it is that this move in particular seems to me like a major multi-billion-dollar conglomerate shafting an entire industry of people. And let's keep this in mind too. It's not just that these are corporations. These are people. These are tens of thousands of people, tens of thousands of jobs that could go away if this kind of thing takes hold. Turning their backs on all of that because somebody looked at a spreadsheet and said, well, this is how we can optimize our profits and quarterly reports, etc. It's not just about money to me. Movies aren't just about the money. It's not just about the profit. It's not just about how much you can make and we could have a 30% higher profit if we did this versus this. There is something ineffable about movies. There's something ineffable about film. There's a magic there. And it's not just dollars and cents. It's not just corporate moves. It is something that is inherent to projecting something onto a screen with other people there. To some people, the movie theater is like their church, where they go and they are transported. You're transported to a magical realm. You laugh, you cry, you shout, you cheer, you do everything in a theater. And I don't want to see everything that's going on completely decimate that for everybody, because there are some corporations that saw this as a chance to try a new stream of generating revenue that returned 20% more profit. The Pollyanna dreamer in me that will eternally be disappointed hopes that there is somebody at some of these companies and studios, etc., that make special art form. And that doesn't mean that you can't evolve the technology, that increasingly more and more people do. But I hope that somewhere, someone along the line realizes that they also control the strings to an experience that is very special to so many people and very magical to so many people. And to see that go away because the custodians of that experience decided that they didn't care about that, they just cared about the bottom line, would be a real shame. So this is something that would be a tragedy for movie fans if it went away, because you can't replicate it. You cannot recreate that experience. And it may be that there are fewer places to do it, and that would be very sad. It may be that there are fewer people that go, and depending on who you ask, that could be a good thing or a bad thing. But the real tragedy would be if it disappears completely. And I know it probably never will, but I also don't want to see people lose access to it. I don't want it to become a privilege of the people that live in large cities, or a privilege of the people that happen to live somewhere where there's a film fan who can afford to run one of these things independently. I would love to see some kind of process whereby we can create some kind of happy marriage where these two things can coexist. I think we're off to a very bad start. But my hope is, as more of these announcements come, and Disney has an investor day that's happening this week, so that may be Thursday, that somebody somewhere actually stops to think about what's worth saving and not just how much money they're saving. Well, before we wrap up, let's look at the times when people were actually going to the movies that did not debut on streaming services, and we are going back, believe it or not, 15 years. This doesn't seem like 15 years ago, to December 9th through the 11th, 2005, which saw the debut of The Chronicles of Narnia, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, which debuted to over $65 million in 2005 money. A good debut there. I was always surprised that franchise just kind of petered out. Syriana was number 2. It was technically in its 3rd week of release. However, this was its first week of major release. George Clooney would go on to win an Academy Award for that film. Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire in its 4th week was in 3rd place at $10.2 million. Walk the Line would win an Oscar for Reese Witherspoon, was in its 4th week at $5.7 million. And then in its 3rd week, the Rene Russo, Dennis Quaid comedy Yours, Mine, and Ours, which I had forgotten existed until I was doing this research, was in the 5th spot at just over $5 million. 15 years since Chronicles of Narnia. That is insane, because that means it's been like 15 years since YouTube, because I remember the first thing I ever watched on YouTube was Lazy Sunday from SNL, which was about them going to see the Chronicles of Narnia. So time flies when you're having fun. Let's see some other notable box office moments from this past weekend. 1940, in week 49 of the year, The Philadelphia Story, which would go and win Best Actor for Jimmy Stewart and Best Screenplay, opened. Then in 1979, Robert Wise's Star Trek The Motion Picture launched. I'm very grateful for that movie for launching Star Trek and continuing the series. I'm a big Star Trek fan. I am not a fan of that film, but I'm grateful that it did well enough to give us The Wrath of Khan. In 1983, I was not yet a year old, but Brian De Palma's Scarface hit theaters. That's a movie that has definitely grown in the years since it released. And then back in 2001, Ocean's 11, almost 20 years ago, opened to $38 million plus. That would give way to 2 direct sequels, and then the reboot, Ocean's 8. And at this point, they've got to make 9 and 10, because it's going to drive me crazy if it's just 8, 11, 12, 13. Go back and at least do the next 2. They're fun movies. I love a good heist movie. Let's see what people are watching at home. Let's look at the streaming charts. And over on Amazon, Freaky, which I mentioned, we've seen it in the top 5. It is now available for PVOD. As a matter of fact, Universal is behind Freaky, and this is part of that deal we talked about. They struck that deal with AMC where their films have a very shortened theatrical window. We keep seeing a lot of these. It's there at number 1. Let Him Go, starring Kevin Costner and Diane Lane, is at number 2. Megan is Missing, still there at number 3. New to the Amazon chart is The Grinch, the Illumination version with Benedict Cumberbatch. National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation stays there at number 5. We have Love and Monsters at number 6. John Wick, which has been popping on and off the chart all spring and summer, is back there at number 7. Then we have The New Mutants. And at number 9, Selena, the Jennifer Lopez film, probably spurred by the release of the new Netflix series this past week, is at number 9. And then at number 10, Prancer, which is, I thought, kind of an obscure Christmas film from when I was a kid. It wasn't even that popular when I was growing up, but it's there at number 10 over on Amazon. Let's look at what people are watching on iTunes. The Grinch, Illumination's The Grinch, is there at number 1, followed by Elf, National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation, Fat Man. Then we have Office Christmas Party. So probably, well, I was going to say probably a week where a lot of offices are having their Christmas parties, but it's probably Office Zoom parties this year. Then we have Freaky at number 6, The Polar Express at number 7, Love Actually at number 8. At number 9 is Wander, and at number 10 is Made in Italy. And finally, let's check out what people are watching on Netflix. At number 1 is Peppermint. Now, I wonder if people just assumed that this was a Christmas film, because it is not, but it does star Jennifer Garner action movie. At number 2 is Marauders. Then we have some Christmas holdovers. We have The Christmas Chronicles 2, How the Grinch Stole Christmas, and then the first Christmas Chronicles movie. A new film at number 6, Rust Creek, followed by Captain Underpants Mega Blissmas. This is about a 42-minute film, but it counts on the movie list for Netflix. At number 8 is The Second, which is a movie that was out on premium video on demand earlier this year, but is now available on Netflix. At number 9, Ron Howard's Hillbilly Elegy. And then at number 10, Adam Sandler's Little Nicky. One thing that I was surprised to not see on the list is Mank, which is David Fincher's new film, which covers the writing of Citizen Kane. It's an Oscar hopeful. People saying this could be the David Fincher's Oscar movie where he could, potentially win Best Director, maybe Best Picture. People are talking about Gary Oldman. Usually any original film that you see that comes out on Netflix is gonna be in that top 10, even if it is not necessarily a Christmassy movie or a big blockbuster movie. As I said, you see some premium video on demand. Smaller titles are in this top 10 all the time. Spike Lee's Da 5 Bloods was in this top 10 when it came out. David Fincher's Mank, nowhere to be seen here on this list. So that's a bit surprising, and it could indicate the fact that it may be tough for this movie to find an audience. I mean, it is honestly a bit of a narrow cast. It's a very insidery, very Hollywood-centric tale about, the making of a much older film, even if it is one of the greatest films ever made. Some people would say the greatest films ever made, but it's hard to tell from that title. Still, with the way that Netflix seems to be able to put just about anything they want in this top 10, the fact that Mank isn't there is a real surprise, because generally almost any big Netflix movie that premieres is always in this top 10. So we'll see if Mank catches on, but that was a real surprise for me when I was looking at the top 10. I was planning to review Mank last week, but the big news with HBO Max broke, and then we, as I mentioned, we've got Mandalorian wrapping up its season, so that is something that I'm going to loop back to. I promise I will get to that eventually, because I enjoyed the film, but I definitely have some thoughts on it. So stay tuned. Hopefully at some point very soon, I will drop that Mank review, as we also get to the end of the year and the crush of, even though it's not quite as much of a crush because the FYC deadlines for awards have been pushed back a couple months, we are still in the middle of for your consideration season. So stay tuned. There will be something coming up on Mank. So that wraps up our look at the box office for this week. What do you think about this whole Warner Media HBO Max thing? Do they have trouble coming down the road? Also, stay tuned, because this Thursday, Disney has a big investor day. There were already rumors that they might make a big game-changing announcement about how they're going to deal with their future theatrical releases. We'll see. Some rumors about how they may deal with their streaming services. Are they going to be combining any of them? There may be some news there, but also today, some word came out that we're going to get some news about future releases from Pixar, from Marvel, from Star Wars. So we could be looking at a big news day later this week. Of course, anything big that breaks, stay tuned right here. We will talk about it here on the channel. Thank you so much for watching. As always, if you want to see even more of what we're doing, you can check me out on Patreon at patreon.com/Dan Murrell. These are some of my producer level patrons. We have a lot of fun. We do Schmodown study sessions every month. We do commentaries, watch-alongs that everybody can get to do. We have Dan Decides, which is a Patreon exclusive show that I do just for patrons every 2 weeks. It's a whole lot of fun. I'd love to have you come and join us. Also, don't forget my podcast, All My Movies. We are going through holiday films this month. We just did Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. We just did National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation. And this week, I'm taking on one of the best Christmas movies of all time, Die Hard. I'll be talking Die Hard this week, so be sure to check out All My Movies. And thank you so much for watching me here on YouTube. Please be sure to share, subscribe, like, hit the bell, just hit all the buttons except for the one that looks like that. Everything that you do really helps. It has been a crazy week of news this past week. It looks like we're coming up on another crazy week, and it's been great to actually have some movie news to talk about, but also to share it with all of you and get your thoughts. So thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.